So Fritanga basically made a screenshot where Reforged said that the breakneck speed that false narratives form in this space is remarkable. This is about the FSR4 thing. Mark Cerny does an interview where he clearly indicates Project Amethyst with AMD resulted in FSR4, which will in turn help evolve PSSR. I didn't see any of that here. If anything, they pretty much were working in collaboration to be able to get FSR4's neural network and stuff implemented across their hardware. That's what I'm seeing from the Digital Foundry article. So I don't know where he's getting that from. Perhaps I'm missing something. And then he says, Cerny does an interview, which he clearly indicates Project Amethyst with AMD resulted in FSR4, which will in turn help evolve PSSR. What they're doing and what Mark Cerny said here is very interesting. He said the long-term goal is to work together to create a more ideal hardware architecture for machine learning, something capable of processing the neural networks needed for game graphics at high speed. PS5 Pro was a wonderful learning experience for us here at Sony Interactive Entertainment, and of course, AMD has an incredible amount of knowledge from its multi-generation RDNA roadmap. Again, it just makes sense to combine those expertise. Now, to be clear, this technology has uses beyond PlayStation, and it's about supporting broad work in machine learning across a variety of devices. The biggest win is when developers can freely move their code from device to device. So they're pretty much talking about a future implementation of this FSR4 that may or may not include PS5 Pro. And from his comment about PS5 Pro, it was a wonderful learning experience for us here at SIE. So the question is, was PSSR ready, or was PSSR an experiment of some sort? It seems to me like it must have been a somewhat high-end experiment. Nib then replied him and said, there's a reason these guys are influencers for the comparatively worst performing console platform. LOL. I'm just glad intelligent consumers either aren't privy to their nonsense or can see right through it. I have to say, man, these guys are going to take this whole thing to the next level of tanking their credibility. I was thinking this was going to be a slow process, but these gentlemen are so forthcoming, it's insane. The very first thing that you have to understand is these guys literally carried water for the PS5 Pro. You can't remove that from the context. That's something that must be contextualized in this particular conversation. If, say, they were objective, if, say, they didn't come out with fibs like Nib did, that, the PS5 Pro could match the 4070 and all of that nonsense. I mean, I know for sure D-Batch basically staked his entire reputation on it. And Nib would not stop when, what's his name, was basically smacking them around with different tests, the Turk. I remember that I was thinking to myself, these folk have got to be some of the most disingenuous folk out here, because at the end of the day, it's something that we've seen happen. Even AMD has done something like that before, where they launch, hardware, and the functionality and stuff that comes is not fully cooked and fully baked. Now, in that case, it's a GPU. It still is going to be doing other regular stuff. For example, say you bought the 7800 XT or you bought the 6800 XT and you were waiting for some implementation of ray tracing and stuff at the time you bought it, you still had your raw rasterization power that you could depend on. It wasn't a problem. You know what I mean? Like, you could literally continue your doing your work, continue your gaming with no hiccups, as long as the games came out good and optimized. That was, you could literally be fine at the end of the day. But in the case of the PS5 Pro, you've bought yourself a full-blown hardware device that is supposedly, together. You spend $700, which is a premium from the, previous console generation, to move up to this so-called enthusiast machine, and you got basically nothing. In fact, remember the first iterations of PSSR in games like Jedi Survivor, as shown by Digital Foundry, was crap. They had to basically be rolling out updates on the fly for this thing and having developers use newer versions. So here we have Nib and the, Reforge guy trying to pretty much go back and make themselves, a little bit more of this arbiter of truth in this conversation. No, you've lost that right. The moment Digital Foundry said they saw no need, the same Digital Foundry who came out with the possible 4070 comparisons with the GPU, a clear mistake, I think, was made there by Richard Ledbetter. He never really pointed out the reality, because if you think about the way a PC works, this is the sleeper that really did fool a lot of people when they went ahead to buy that particular console. And I'll say it here today. You were played. If you bought the PlayStation 5 Pro expecting significant boosts in performance, you were played. Let me show you something. A gaming device has to work in tandem with three major players. Your CPU is number one. If your CPU is not powerful, you're in a very weird place because games will require CPU, reliant tasks. That's the very first thing you have to realize. In fact, Marvel's Spider-Man 2018 is a game where its CPU, usage and the way the developers program the game is tapped almost to perfection. They ensure that they're using your CPU and utilizing your CPU very well. A lot of developers are finding it very difficult to get to get their games to run properly because their CPU utilization in their games are not properly mapped. So when the PlayStation 5 Pro was not upgrading the CPU, this is my CPU chart here live, my Ryzen 9 3900X, 12 core processors, 24 thread, whatever the heck it is. Whenever the PS5 Pro was not going to receive a CPU boost, that was already a hamstring because any game that would have CPU limitations would suffer from that on the console. That was already a given. There was nowhere else that anything could go. Then you have your RAM. Now, this is kind of a, given that you need some RAM, and the way SoCs are designed, they're designed differently. On the desktop, things are more separated, but I'm just pointing out the components. In the SoC version, they'll probably go ahead and use the RAM module in a very interesting way. And then you have your GPU. They went ahead and gave a GPU upgrade, but there's no amount of GPU upgrade that you're going to give that's going to provide you much significant changes from what the CPU limitation is going to allow for. For instance, if say AI, generation in terms of, or I guess AI interaction, say all the people on the streets and stuff, they're CPU thread bound in terms of how they work. You see cars and all that stuff moving around. It's still pulling a lot of resources from the CPU because your CPU also helps with some graphics rendering as well because your GPU is feeding it information and such. If those things are limiting your CPU in terms of they're costing it more use, you're going to be at a bottleneck. So they literally sold a bottleneck with the promise of some kind of software, implementation to be able to get the games to look better as the, treatment, or I guess as the remedy for that. And that backfired in, a number of games. So what we're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, is I think this whole push to, make the consoles seem like they can go head to head with PC technology is going to expose console. And if you notice the way Mark is saying in terms of the way FSR is, it's funny to see that this is something that has to actually move even further down the road. This is said here. However, it's going to take some time. This is Richard writing, I think, to see the new technology migrate across to PlayStation 5 Pro. Then he quotes Mark Cerny saying, our focus for 2025 is working with developers to integrate PSSR into their titles. In parallel, though, we have already started to implement the neural network on PS5 Pro. Our target is to have something very similar to FSR 4's upscaler available on PS5 Pro for 2026 titles as the next evolution of PSSR. It should take the same inputs and produce essentially the same outputs. Doing that implementation is rather ambitious and time consuming, which is why you haven't already seen this new upscaler on the PS5 Pro. So they sold you a more expensive premium console based on a promise. Do you remember when I told you that that PlayStation's leaked documentation had already pretty much told you what direction they were going to go in terms of getting their money from y'all? Because here's what they understand. They understand the unrelenting fanboy, the ones like these, right? This one that Nib is talking about here, right? The ones that are intelligent, no, they understand your undying dedication. So what they're going to do is they're going to go for premium content. They're going to go for premium sales model is the central approach. PlayStation is going to get more and more expensive for those of you in the ecosystem. You're going to get squeezed. You're going to keep getting squeezed more and more with nowhere to actually go. That's what they're going to do. They'll upsell you on everything. They already started with the PlayStation 5 Pro. They've already started bringing out controllers for The Last of Us 2 for games that, for a game that they basically canceled any sequel for. This is what they're going to do with you. Don't be fooled, folks. Don't be fooled. And keep, by all means, letting these so-called individuals that want to come now on the back end and pretend like they were always on the front end of the truth. If you keep listening to them, yes, that's the information you're going to get, and you'll be scarved out of your money. Most of us are grown right now. Most of us should be saving for retirement right now. But sure, give your money to PlayStation and throw it all away if that's what you want to do. Your choice. I couldn't be bothered telling you what to do with your money. Just letting you know that these men are grown at the age now where they should be taking, and talking about things in a wise financial sense. But they're taking y'all's money. Well, I won't say Nib is, but I'll say Reforge. He's taking money from people to tell them things that at the end of the day, we go back and look and it's a bunch of fugazi. I'm sure he's probably investing in his retirement with, on their backs. It should be interesting to see how this all plays out. Hate pocket watching, but I hope to never do that. But I'm just pointing out the reality when they come out here and try to say narratives are being fomented when they foment narratives themselves. Talk to me in the comment section. Thanks for watching the video. Peace out.